we kind of like the idea of this season not just being about giving people stuff. There are a lot of ways we can give back that do not involve gift giving in the traditional sense and that can really make a difference in people's lives. So with that said, we scheduled this show probably close to a month ago. Cathy Zall from New London Homeless Hospitality Center is my guest. She's been the executive director there probably for about a decade now. And it is interesting. Our timing was better than we anticipated because although the date was decided upon quite a while ago, just this afternoon a directive came out from the City of New London, Mayor Passero's office, because of our weather advisory. So it seems like a better time than ever to talk about homelessness in our community and what we can do. So welcome, Cathy.
Thank you for having me.
I guess to start out, maybe you can talk a little bit about your now pretty long history with the Homeless Hospitality Center and just give a little bit of an overview of what it does.
Yeah, well, it's sort of interesting, when you mention it, to think back how, yes, it was a decade ago, but it was only a decade ago. And we saw something that needed to be addressed. There was nobody to run the homeless shelter, and I'm sure you remember, a couple people died outside, and it was really just a group of citizens who said, this can't be, led by Emmett Jarrett. And we just started out with what we had, some mats and a room and some volunteers, and just did what we could. And now today we have the hospitality center. We have our own space and a fully staffed shelter, and I think, as I just look at it, it just shows, like, if people just see a problem and work on it steadily, you can really make incredible change, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's true. In a way, 10 years sounds like a lot, but in a way, it doesn't. I kind of remember that period about 10, 11 years ago because I happened to work for Head Start, and our classroom was in the basement of St. James. And at the time, the last 2 years perhaps I was doing that, there were seasonal shelter facilities on the third floor, but it was kind of makeshift.
Right.
There was no real organization. There wasn't any year-round support service.
Well, there was more organization than you think.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it was really a lot of work.
Right.
But it didn't seem like it was permanent.
But so many people kind of despair. Well, I can't do the perfect thing, and so people don't do anything. And what to me it just shows it wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing, and it was a stepping stone. And we learned from doing that, and so. I just think that applies to lots of things. If you see something, do something.
Yeah.
And just start where you can. Do what you can. Yeah.
And the idea of a stepping stone really is important because, as you mentioned, one of the things that provided the impetus for more action was people dying outside.
Right.
So even any effort is going to reduce the number of people dying outside.
Right. And I would say the other thing that I see now is that better than I did is that's the people that are outside is a terrible tragedy, people who are homeless a long period of time. But the other thing, and I feel more strongly about all the time, is just how the reality of having so many people who are very, very poor and are right on the edge. And it doesn't take much. People can be fine and they'll be working hard and then they get sick. And a lot of jobs, you miss a few days, you get fired, or your car breaks down, or your child gets sick, or things happen. And I just feel really, really important for us to be that place that if something like that happens to you, that you've got a place where you can get a new start. And so that's another aspect of homelessness that a lot of people don't think about.
And actually thinking about that, I get really concerned because it seems as though the safety nets we have in place right now,
What safety net?
yeah, really, were inadequate before, and they're getting worse. I mean, we're seeing that children are going to be losing health insurance, and maybe a lot of adults will be losing health insurance. So, medical problems, medical debt
Right.
is a big reason that people lose their homes in this
Right.
country, which is kind of unheard of anywhere else in the first world that you.
Yeah, and people, I think,
You
don't
go.
realize that there is welfare. If there's children in a family, there is
Right.
welfare. But for single adults, there is no welfare. Okay, so if you can't find a job and you're not disabled enough to, get and apply for Social Security, there is absolutely nothing. You are absolutely destitute. And so that's why the shelter is so important, because first, it's a place to stay, but if you think about it, if you've got absolutely nothing, and let's say you've lost all your IDs and you don't have $15 to get a new birth certificate, you are just stuck. And that, to me, is outrageous, that a person should get stuck for lack of $15. So we're able to fill a lot of those gaps, and I just love it. And it's only because of private donors. There's no public money for that kind of stuff, but luckily we have, a lot of really, really generous private donors, and that lets us do those little things for people, and it's incredible. It can turn a person's life back around. It's just great.
And the return on the investment of something like that is incredible. Sometimes I think when we think about finances, public finances in
Right.
particular, we think, oh, so much money is being spent, but how much of that money is preventing like bigger expenses down the road, or
Right.
not even very far down the road?
Right.
And now I wanted to mention too, talk a little bit about the variety of guests you have in the shelter. And veterans is one group that's pretty highly represented, correct?
Well, fewer and fewer, actually. It's probably about 10% or a little bit less. But the Veterans Administration, I give them a tremendous credit. They really decided to end veteran homelessness and have poured resources in. If we had as many resources for everybody as we have for veterans, our problem wouldn't
Wow.
be solved, but it would be much, much better. So there are definitely homeless veterans, every month there's new people, but, we have a house on Mountain Avenue where we can put veterans for help, give them someplace to live short term, and there's a lot of good help available, finding housing and other things, so.
From a political point of view, does that help seem like it's not going to disappear?
Who
Well,
knows?
we never know.
I don't know.
We don't know.
These days, you don't even know, but.
I know, and my concern is that, as poor as our safety net is, it's actually showing signs of maybe getting worse,
Yes.
both in terms of national programs and also state programs.
I think you're right, unfortunately.
So, now you mentioned some of the things that get people homeless. Can you talk a little bit about, the range of guests you have at the shelter?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the course of the year, we have about 500 different people who stay at the shelter. That's a lot of people in a small area like this. And so it ranges from, they're at the sort of more stereotype of homeless individuals, people who've been homeless a long time. There's often mental illness involved, and people, get disconnected or never were connected to mental health services and sort of spiral down. Addiction is also an issue at the extreme. People
And
are
I'm
homeless.
guessing some of those people don't have regular physical health providers as well as mental health providers.
Yeah, there's complicated situations, and some of that I've come to, to learn that in our society, if you're not a danger to yourself or others, you have a fairly big range of choices, and there are people who are living in ways that to me seem far from ideal, but they're not a danger to themselves or other. They severely have mental illness issues, but they're making certain choices, and we do our best to keep outreaching to people and help them stay as safe as possible. But that's the extreme. If you have 500 people over the course of the year, that's probably 25. And those 25 out of 500 are what most people see, who people see, camped out, or see people panhandling, or see other stuff like that. But the vast majority of people who are experiencing homelessness, it's for economic reasons, primarily.
And it hasn't settled into a chronic condition for them?
No. And over half of the people that come into the shelter are out in less than 2 weeks. So there's a ton of different stories. I was in a relationship, but then that relationship turned bad. Not like domestic violence bad, like you could go to a domestic violence provider, but I just didn't feel safe there anymore, or things were happening there that were making me uncomfortable. To people who, had interesting stories of people that have a place to live and then something happens. That person dies, their mother, their aunt, somebody they knew, they had a room there, but that ends, and they're...
And suddenly the house is on the market and they're out of luck.
That's exactly right, and they're out of luck, and until they find a similar situation again, they're homeless. A lot of it is just economic, that you hang on to a place, but then, you get a little behind or something happens. Just a lot of different paths.
Well, you mentioned the medical debt, and I have to tell you, we had out within our own family, we had a story that about 15 years ago, Bob had a bad bicycle accident. He was at the Lawrence Memorial for 11 days, part of it in intensive care, and we were not sure we were covered by health insurance because I had my summers off and I had not yet signed up for COBRA, and it was near the end of the period where I could retroactively sign up. So anyway, we found out all the options, and one of the options was he could have signed up for an emergency program that would have paid his bill, which was much lower than it would be today. It was like $42,000. But guess what? They'd have put a lien on our house. And I can imagine even if that program still exists, the bills are probably double what they were 15 years ago.
Right.
And you could end up owing more on your house.
But the big difference, though, today from then is that, and we have to give Connecticut credit, Connecticut was an early adopter of the Medicaid expansion.
That's true.
And so there is virtually no one in the shelter who doesn't qualify for Medicaid in Connecticut. So, and
that's good to hear.
That was a huge change. And again, to be sort of fair to the state, a part of the budget problem today is that it has proven very expensive to insure as many people as they do. But, as I watch what's happening nationally about the Affordable Care Act, I'm proud to be in Connecticut because we have an exchange. People are still eligible for Medicaid expansion. So right now, I would be very surprised that we have people. Now, again, it could be different, like if you had income and then suddenly you get sick, it might be different.
But that isn't as much a problem here as it might be some other places.
No, or as it was before the Affordable Care Act.
So, well, we'll see what happens in the future.
I don't even want to think.
I know, it is disturbing because some of these things that are in place are not assured to be still in place a year from now or 2 years from now.
Well, and that people think it's acceptable to talk about a country where some people don't have health insurance. It's just, really, we can't lose our sense of shock that people could think that way. Of course, everybody deserves health insurance. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
our system isn't even very efficient, so I think we could talk all night about some of the problems with our system. It's so fragmented, and there's such a profit motive put in it on so many different levels that many countries that provide health insurance to all their citizens spend a lot less than we do. So I guess, what are the barriers that you face? One of the things you do is help get people into more stable housing. So what barriers do you face when you're doing that, or do they face?
Yeah, barriers. Well, income is one, and this is very, very hard. Obviously, people that don't have income. New London, we're fortunate. Our housing is not as expensive as some parts of Connecticut, but still, housing is expensive.
And rental in particular, if it's not subsidized, can be expensive.
It can be expensive, and that's why, we, there was some controversy about this, but I think it's the way you have to do it. We have people that share apartments, and so it's a lot cheaper for two people to share a two-bedroom apartment. As far as I'm concerned, it would be great if everybody could have their own place and their own kitchen and their own bathroom. I get that, and I hope people will get that eventually. But to me, if you've got very limited income, you've got to think creatively. And if you think about people that are getting disabilities, SSI, get about $700 a month for everything. So you have $700 a month for everything. You get food stamps in addition. But so if you pay $500, you're not going to get an apartment. You're going to have to share.
Yeah.
But again, we work on that. We try to, help people figure out how to make that work. That I would say, sort of lack of income and expensive housing are probably the two biggest barriers.
Now, do you find that some of the people have to work on other debts at the same time, or?
I think a lot of people are sort of past that.
Yeah.
I mean, very checkered credit histories, but
Yeah, so they're just basically just starting.
they're giving up
At
on
the
that.
bottom.
And and a lot of people, we pretty much only rent apartments with utilities included, because a lot of people have utility debt and can't get utilities in their own name. So we have to find apartments that include utilities. So you got to be creative.
And, well, it's interesting. I've been a little bit involved with a group that's working on trying to get a community land trust
Yep.
started in New London. And one of the problems is that there are people renting who should be able to buy, but because you have to go through so many hoops to buy, some people who don't have great credit but who earn enough, they're paying more to rent than they would to buy, but they're just pushing the rental market prices up because
Yeah,
there's too
that's
much
interesting.
pressure on that part of the market. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of it.
Good.
They're trying to focus on families with an income of maybe $40,000 to $60,000 a year, which is not anywhere near
No.
rock bottom.
No, that's good.
But some of these people are paying $1,500 a month to rent an apartment, and to buy a house in New London, they'd be paying less.
That makes sense. That's a good
and,
project.
And getting some equity and getting some tax breaks. So we'll see. Housing in New London and in the surrounding areas is very interesting to look into.
Well, but there's a lot of good housing stock in New London. I
There
think there's a
is.
lot of possibilities, and obviously Echo and a number of other,
Oh, yeah,
Hope and another number of other people are doing it on a small scale. We've purchased 4 buildings from the hospitality center that we converted and rent out. There's opportunities. Some good housing stock.
There is good housing stock, and it is not expensive to purchase.
Right.
I don't know if it's all in very good condition, but most of the houses, I imagine, were built, before 1960, and they're
Way before.
many of them before 1930.
Yeah.
I was just looking at a population chart for New London, and our current population, which is about 27,000, is about the same as what the population was between 1925 and 1930. So I know, in the South End, houses have been built more recently, but in the core of the city, those houses have been there since 1920,
There's some nice houses, though.
1925.
Some very nice properties.
Yeah, and like they're just not built like that anymore.
That's
even.
it. That's it.
Now, so we talked about the shelter, but maybe talk about all of the, in a little bit more detail, the different levels of support and the different facilities you have.
Okay.
So I don't know, maybe just start out with the main shelter.
Yeah, well, the shelter is what you'd expect. It's a big room with a lot of bunk beds. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, we work hard to make it as hospitable and as friendly and clean and as we can. We also have, as you know, like a little a respite section, which is smaller and quieter, and people can stay in all day. We do that in cooperation with L&M Hospital. It used to be horrible. People would get discharged from the hospital and have nowhere to recuperate, and it was terrible. So
I can
I'm
just
very,
imagine that.
very proud of this collaboration, so that people coming out of the hospital have it's not fancy, it's just a room sort of like this with a divider in it, but you can sleep all day. It's right next to the bathroom, handicap shower, so we have that respite.
So
And
if
then-
people are sick, they don't have to be out in it.
That's right. We used to close at 7:30, and even if you were sick at 7:30, we had to close, and you were out and about. And now it's just so much better. And the visiting nurse is there, community health center is there 2 days a week, not just for respite, but for everybody. So I just think that's, again, it's almost like it's so obvious, Sick people
Yeah.
shouldn't have to walk around, they should have a place to rest. Let's not go too crazy with this, right? And then we do a lot of work with what we call rapid rehousing, and I think this is like a very major change in the homeless area, which is the answer to homelessness is not shelter. The answer to homelessness is housing. And so rapid rehousing lets us just help people get back into housing. Like, let's say you finally get a job at Dunkin' Donuts, all right, a part-time job. Great, I think all work is good, but it's gonna take you a long time to save first month's rent and security
Right.
deposit. So what we do is we give people as much as they need, first month's rent and security deposit. And then by the second month, they can pay for the apartment on their own, out of their wages. I mean, to me, again, it just makes so much sense that it's better for them to work, they can sleep, they can have a place to keep their clothes, they can shower, they can, do all of that. So rapid rehousing is, I think, fantastic.
Well, wasn't it in Utah that they decided that just like providing housing for everyone who was homeless cost less than like picking up the pieces?
Well, it's complicated because, again, there are some programs for people who are very disabled where you get housing for your whole life. But if you think about so many people, unfortunately, we don't have the money to afford that.
Right.
So people have to kind of get going on their own.
Yeah, but they get a little bit of a grace
Yeah,
period.
we get focused on housing. The other thing is it used to be, you have to learn how to budget your money first. You have to be in recovery first. You have to have this first. You have to have that first. And now we have housing first. So the idea is get people into housing, and the other things that they're struggling with are going to be easier to deal with.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think, you and me and everyone out here, you have to have some basic stability
That's
in your
right.
life to be able to think about any of the other stuff.
That's right.
And, even like going to work every day, if you don't have a home with a closet with your clothes.
That's exactly right.
It's really going to be a struggle.
That's right. So we try to solve that for people. And then we own buildings, as I mentioned, so we have some affordable housing that we run. And we do a few other things. We do street outreach, so we are out there trying to connect with the people who are living outdoors. And I would say there's probably about maybe 15 people living outdoors in New London right now. And some of them, they know they could come into the shelter if they want to, and they don't. But we visit them, not we, one person on our staff, and talk to them and try to talk to them about options. Like now, when it's so cold,
Right.
we were out telling them, it's really going to be cold tonight. If you feel in danger, please, you can come in to the shelter, working with the city to make sure that people know they can come inside if they need to.
And especially now with single digits coming,
That's right.
it's not the same as being in a tent when it's 35
Yeah, it's not good to be in a
degrees.
tent anytime, to be honest. It's dangerous, and it's just not good for your health. But there are people who are making that choice, and comes and goes, different. Used to be quite a few people under the Gold Star Bridge, but that, when they did the renovations, they kind of pushed everybody
Yeah, I know
out
there
of
was a
there.
group at Riverside Park until, not inside the park itself, but the
Yeah,
area
right next to it.
between
Yeah, I
the
know them.
railroad tracks and
Yes.
the river that I guess about 3 or 4 weeks ago got removed. But yeah, I have to tell you that this past summer when we went to our annual trip to the West Coast, it was very interesting because we visited 3 cities, Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland, and they all have huge problems with homelessness.
Yes.
Because they have a lot of jobs and fairly mild climates, but the cost of housing is through the roof. So there are a lot of employed people who are homeless, and the cities did not all deal with it equally well, just from an outsider point of view. It seemed as though in Vancouver, you felt pretty confident that the homeless people were still getting health care and they had some resources. But in Portland, oh my gosh, downtown, every other block, there were people who were in some kind of pain. It was really, it was
Right.
pretty disturbing. We lived in Portland in the late 70s, and it was just like they really don't have a handle on it.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes people are sort of critical of our work, with the homeless, but I'd have to say, I feel like we made a lot of progress. I feel like there's a lot fewer people on the street. There's not people living in the parking garage anymore. So it's not perfect. We can do
Right.
better, and again, as I try to say to people, we are not the dictators of the homeless. So there are people doing things that I don't like and I don't approve
Right.
of. But, on the other hand, there's a lot of people who I think would be behaving in a way that would be much more of a problem to the public if we weren't there. So that's what I try to,
Absolutely.
that's my story.
And
when people are
honestly,
complaining.
there are a lot of wealthy people with homes in our community who have disturbing behaviors that I might not approve of. So
Okay.
I don't know why we should necessarily be more judgmental of one group's bad habits than
That's
another.
a good point. Good point.
One thing, though, I noticed, and we spoke about this a little bit before the show, that one part of our local infrastructure that really seems to be missing is public transportation.
Yeah.
All those West Coast cities I went to really did have great public transit. And I don't know how to get it going, but
Yeah, I wish I could really think about that, because part of the challenge of getting a job if you're very poor is you're not going to have a car, because car's really expensive.
yeah.
So you're not going to have a car. The seat buses stop running at 8 o'clock, and they don't really run on the weekends. But when you're newly trying to find a job, what you're often going to get offered is like third shift. And so if you
And
don't
it's
have a
probably
car,
not going to be right in New
it's
London.
not gonna be right in New
It might be
London.
the casino, it might be,
that's exactly right. It might be
Okay.
outside of New London. And I know I've heard people talking about this, because this isn't just people who are homeless. It's like all people. How could transportation be improved and give people access to jobs? People who live in the city, how could they get access to jobs outside the city? And I don't know if any progress is being made. I know that the Council of Governments was doing some studies on that, but I think it is a really important issue.
And it is one that we have to tackle regionally, because it isn't just a matter of getting between downtown and Ocean Beach or
No,
downtown and the college. It's really people might be working at the mall, or they might be working at the
Yeah,
casino.
or it's a really, it is a regional problem, and we've had, for example, people who could get jobs, again, I use Dunkin' Donuts again as an example, but you have to be at work at 5. And if you live in New London and you're Dunkin' Donuts in Groton, to get there by 5, there is no public transportation, and it's hard to find a friend who at 4:30, if you know anybody that has a car, at 4:30 in the morning is going to come and get you. And so there would have been a real good job opportunity, and the person just couldn't make it. So I hope somebody's thinking about that. I'm not, but
Yeah, I'm not really either, but we'll put it out there.
yeah, put
and
it out there,
maybe-
put it out to the universe.
Yeah, so maybe there's someone who transportation is really their passion. And New London actually is well positioned to have good transportation. We just, it just hasn't really been developed, you know.
I'm sure it's
the
cost. I'm sure it's cost.
I'm sure
don't
it
know.
is, but it's such a boost to,
Well,
to
it's
the
also, I think
quality of life.
it's a chicken and egg thing, that it takes a while. You have to have enough of a system so people start, you were saying that too, is that
Yeah.
because the system isn't very user-friendly, you're not going to give up your car. Whereas if it were really great, you
Right.
might make
You
a different
might.
choice, and more people might use public transit, so.
And I think I had heard at some point that buses, they have to really be running about every 15 minutes, so that
Probably, yeah.
to be really usable, because people, if it's within 15 minutes and you don't have to really memorize the schedule, you know you can show up at the bus stop and you probably won't wait more than 10 minutes. But once it gets stretched out, you're not going to go to the bus stop not knowing the schedule and not know if it'll come in 5 minutes or in 55 minutes.
Maybe you should get a transit person onto your show.
You know, and I
about that.
might. You know, we have had Norman Garrick, who is a transit person from Yukon. He's in Zurich right now, so maybe over the summer. But we've never really talked about public transit with him, more like road design and how roads can do
Okay.
better at getting people where they have to be. But I know public transit is part of that whole picture, so maybe in June. He'll be back. He's teaching in Zurich this year, but he'll be back, I think, in May or June.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be great, because I think transportation, I wouldn't think of it except for our annual trips to the West Coast,
Right.
to big cities where we ride the buses and the light rail all the time, being not familiar with the system, like being tourists, and finding it so convenient and so pleasant to do it. So every year we have this little reminder, and then back in New London, and you go 2 miles and you get into a car. It's kind of embarrassing. Okay, so there's for anyway, emergency services you provide in the shelter, and then are there any other support services that we haven't mentioned?
Well, obviously, we're always trying to partner with other people. And one interesting thing we have is something that's called the community care team. And so once a month, people from the hospital, from our shelter, from community health center get together to sort of talk about how can we be more helpful to people with very high needs. The Southeastern Mental Health Authority is there. And I think that's an incredible forum, because sort of getting linkages between different providers is really hard for people. But this way, representatives from all those people are there in the room, and they've done some really remarkable work. And it may actually be expanding because, as you might know, the City of New London got a grant for kind of community-based response to the opioid crisis. So they're going to be hiring some, it's not exactly the name, but like recovery coaches who will be out in the community trying to help people who are struggling with addiction connect to resources. And they might also participate in our community care team. And I don't know if they're still coming as regularly, but for example, in probation, there is a mental health probation officer. And many people are, as you know, prison is probably the biggest concentration of people with mental health problems.
And a lot of them dual, substance
That's right.
abuse plus mental health.
That's right. So I think, this is an incredible initiative, and really the city and Ledgelight Health District and, a number of other people are coming together. The Alliance for Living has been very involved in it, and as you know, they're doing their needle exchange. So we, in New London, we have a chance because we're small and we have very good leadership. I'm very impressed. I think the mayor's done a terrific job, and Jeannie Milstein, who's like a absolute miracle. We're really talking to each other, and so addiction isn't something the Homeless Hospitality Center can solve. We're not experts in that, plus we don't have any money for stuff like that. But a lot of people suffering from addiction are in our shelter, and so if we can partner with Ledgelight or a recovery coach who could come in, be helping people, I think it could be even better.
That is something that is really nice about New London. And for someone who's in a crisis situation, it might be hard to navigate, but for those of us who are here all the time, it's really pretty easy for us to network, much more than in some places. Okay, so at this point, let's talk about different ways that people can learn more about what you do or get involved in some way or be supportive in some ways. And I did look at your website, and I noticed you have monthly tours of the shelter. So
we do.
How do people get signed up for those?
Well, it's right on the website. That tells you there. The person's name is Sarah Offner-Seals. Just to let her know that you want to come. The dates are all on the website.
And I think it looked like they were like the third Tuesdays of
Something
the month.
like that. We change them up. We don't always do them on Tuesdays, just in case. But it's just a chance for people. There's just to come in. It's only an hour, 5:15 to 6:15. And it's, myself and a number of our guests at the shelter, and we just talk about what we do. We show people the shelter, and I think it's really, I just really appreciate, and I encourage people, because people think like homeless shelters are, I don't know what they think, but it's really not like that. And so people see what the shelter looks like. They hear a little bit from some of our guests. They get to, ask questions and look around. And I think it's a great opportunity just to get to know a bit more about what we do. And then we have every kind of volunteering, from an hour a month to every day.
Now, what kind of different tasks would volunteers do?
Well, from kind of the lowest kind of level of kind of complexity, we have every night, we have people that bring in some kind of food. It's not a meal because we have a bus and we take people to the community meal center. No point in duplicating a very good program like the meal center. But we do have people that just come in from about 6:30 to 7, something like that, and bring some kind of something to share. And we have Rotary that come, we have churches, we have family groups, we have Mitchell College. The best food of the week is the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard comes on Wednesdays. Everybody's, Coast Guard Day. And so, they bring the food from whoever does the food, but the cadets come, and usually one of them comes with a guitar. I don't know who he is, but he sings, and, But, so that's like we have a calendar, which you can sign up for. And so for some people, just to come once a month and just bring something and be there and fellowship with people, that's that's one kind of volunteering. But then we also have people who work at our front desk at night and during the day. That's it's kind of intense over there, a lot of people, but answering the phone, helping people out, doing paperwork. And then we have our help center where people can just go and just get help. So we have volunteers that help people put resumes together, help people, research things, fax things for people, get things for people, help people get their mail, help people get free cell phones. So the help center is another good place. And then, we have people, like some people come and do crafts once a month. We have people that help with the garden. It's sort of anything that anybody can do, we need. And then, of course, fundraising. Like, we always, appreciate people, financial support.
And you can do that online. And also, I noticed there's a page that talks about like in-kind donations, the kinds of things you could use.
Yeah, so, coffee, we go through a lot of coffee and a lot of sugar and a lot of Cremora. So if people donate that, or sometimes schools or whatever will have a drive. And then we ask for, like, we do get a lot of clothing donations. Luckily, we have a volunteer who keeps on top of that. But we do ask, like, for new socks and new underwear. We have people that come to us, and believe it or not, when they let you out of prison, they just leave you with your prison clothes. And so we have people that come to us, they have, really nothing, absolutely nothing. And
no home to go home to either.
No, but, just their prison clothes. So, we have a little clothing closet, but we want to give people new socks and, new underwear. So those are good things people can donate. We have one wonderful lady who makes like hundreds of hats. I don't know how she makes so many hats, flannel hats. And people donate gloves, and, people are very generous. It's good.
And I guess, we have some time left, but can you talk a little bit about Homeward Bound Treasures?
Homeward Bound Treasures, yeah, that's our thrift store. Thank you for plugging that, which if I forgot, I'd be in big trouble. So Homeward Bound Treasures is downtown on Golden Street. It's right behind Caruso's piano place. And basically what we're doing there is people donate household goods, furniture, appliances, dishes, artwork, and we sell it. The hope is to sell enough of it to make a little bit of a profit, but it's really a beautiful store. We have a wonderful manager it's really a nice store. People can find some really, really good bargains there. And then for people that want to donate, if they replacing their sofa or want to have stuff that they don't need, we pick up. So it's possible to call Homeward Bound and schedule a time. We'll send our very friendly drivers and their truck out there, pick stuff up, give you a receipt so people can, for tax purposes. So it's a resource for people who want things, but it's also a resource for people who are, trying to declutter.
Right, and keep things out of the landfill and
That's exactly right.
earn money for the program. Now, is there a possibility that any donations go through Homeward Bound Treasures to people who are just getting housing?
Well, sometimes, because at Homeward Bound, we have, they have very, very high standards. It's like all perfect, really, really.
Yeah, I think I got my son a chest of drawers there about 8 years ago. It was gorgeous.
Yeah. So again, and part of our problem is we don't have a lot of storage space. So, but there sometimes, like if something comes in and we can't sell it at Homeward Bound, but it's still nice, because obviously poor people should have nice things. I mean, not just broken things or ripped things. But so some of it we set aside, and some, like, we get a lot of dishes and stuff. So we do have a storage space where we keep that for people moving into housing.
And let's see. Oh, and I did notice one other thing, that you have a position for hire now.
Yes, we do.
So that would be getting very involved indeed. But I'm guessing you frequently have some positions, but what are you looking for right now?
Well, I think right now the one is we have is a case manager to work with veterans. So that's a person who, and we have obviously the housing side, but we also, there's somebody that works one-on-one with all of the veterans to help them connect to services and to housing. I think that's what we have right now. But we, we're always, there's always turnover. And recently we hired, because in the winter we have an overflow space. So in the winter, our commitment is that nobody should be outside. So if the shelter is full, we have a waiting list, and during the warm weather, unfortunately, that sometimes means that somebody in need of shelter maybe can't get in. But in the winter, we have a room that we open up. It's almost embarrassingly simple. We just have mats that we put down on the floor. But so, like, we hired some people for the winter to provide some extra, support for that. So we make sure nobody's outside in the winter.
And I guess, well, maybe the last thing to talk about is, so if someone who's watching knows someone who's out there or is at risk of losing their place to live, what would be the process for someone at risk that way to get in touch with you?
Well, 211, all homeless services are sort of coordinated through 211, so people call 211, and if 211 will sort of try to talk to people, sometimes the person isn't really about to be homeless, maybe they're behind on the utilities, and 211 can help them. How do you get a utility, prevent a shut-off, et cetera. But if the person is really homeless, then 211 makes the person an appointment, and we schedule in our region appointments always the next business day. So if you call on a Tuesday, you're going to get an appointment on a Wednesday. And then people come in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the Hospitality Center, Tuesday and Thursday at the Covenant Shelter, and somebody talks to people and figures out, what their situation is. If we can do something to divert them from shelter, we try. But if need be, offer shelter to people.
And back to where we started, kind of the new directive that came from the City of New London, that there will be a warming center from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. At the Senior Center, which they give the address as Broad Street, which is so confusing because you enter it from, I forget what the name of the street is, it goes between Mercer and Broad. What? Brainerd Street, thank you. So particularly during this very cold weather spell, people can find a warm spot to go to during the day as well.
Yes, that's right. And of course, most people who are homeless are staying, we're open during the day as well. We have a daytime drop-in center. But I think this is great, I think the city's just trying to provide, if in this very cold weather, there's people who maybe are not gonna feel comfortable coming to a shelter,
Right.
but they're cold, they can know that they can, spend time at the warming center.
And then it says also, after business hours, people in need will be directed either to you,
Right.
to the Homeless Hospitality Center, or women and children to the Covenant
Yes.
Shelter,
Right.
which we really didn't talk about it, although we've had those folks on the show as well at times.
Right.
So, yeah, 211 is the contact. Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you
Cathy.
very much, it's always a pleasure.
Anyone who wants more information, the website is very easy, nlhhc.org.
Yep.
And there's a ton of information, some of what we went over here, and some, financial reports and detailed lists of what people can donate, and a lot of information about the services provided. So thank you, Cathy.
Thank you.
And good luck. Try to keep warm.
I'm luckily gonna be doing that.
Okay, and we will see you all next week. I think the Waterford Greens are going to come in and talk about some Waterford issues next
Good.
week. So until then, we'll see you, and thanks, Cathy.
Thank you very much.
Hosanna,